Okay, hey everybody, welcome to another episode of On the Wrist from Off the Cuff. Today we have another review from the brand Borealis, which was founded back in 2013. A little bit about them. They're a micro brand, definitely with a vintage aesthetic, where they focus on updating classics of the past while taking advantage of today's modern manufacturing improvements. So essentially you're going to get a lot of nice vintage styling, just with a much more modern build, which honestly compared to a lot of vintage watches, it is honestly going to be head and shoulders above when it comes to build quality. Even the older luxury brands from 20, 30 years ago, when you compare that to something you can now get out of very basic factories, you're pretty much going to be blown away by the difference. Now, as far as this particular model, this is the Olisipo, and it definitely has a little vintage inspired diver style to it, as you can tell. And if you're wondering if you can't quite place what other styling that it is reminiscent of, I think personally that it does take a lot of inspiration from Grand Seiko, from the case shape to some of the choices as far as well as the texturing on the dial. Now, this particular model is, actually, like I said, is the Olisipo, and the price is going to be $390 on pre-order, and you just do a 50% deposit, which is $195, and they're estimated to ship in May of 2020. So time goes by pretty quickly, guys. I know that's a ways out for some of you, but if you check the site right now, there's a lot of these models that are already sold out. So it's probably good to get on as early as possible if this one's going to interest you. Now, this particular type of watch is, of course, a dive watch. Some key common characteristics in design language when you're looking for a dive watch is going to be, of course, you're going to want water resistance, typically through some type of screw down crown. You're going to want something that's tough, legible, with a dive time bezel, and a diver's extension is always nice if it's on bracelet. Now, with all that said, let's go ahead and take a closer look. Alrighty. Now, apart from the case shape and that textured dial, for me, what's most striking about this piece is the visual weight and the way that the layout, especially this high contrast chapter ring, essentially that index there, really shrinks down the dial. So when you look at it, it definitely is going to have that visual weight of something that's going to be closer to like a 38 or a 39 millimeter. Although this is a 40 millimeter watch, it does have quite compact dimensions. And when you take a look at it, some beautiful chamfering there that helped you thin everything down. Relatively short lug to lug there at 47 millimeters. So although this is going to be a very nice sized watch in terms of sweet spot, it's also visually going to tie more into the vintage side of the house by actually appearing much smaller and having much less visual weight due to the actual layout and design. Now, like I mentioned before, this is 40 millimeters across, and then it's going to be 12 millimeters thick there, and then 47 millimeters lug to lug. Everything, of course, is 316L surgical grade stainless steel. You have a sapphire crystal on top that is flat with an inner AR coating, and then the back side here is solid and etched. The crown is a screw down crown and signed. Really nicely done there as far as from a detail perspective. The bezel is fully loomed here, and also is ceramic with a nice brush on it, so that adds even more dimension. Again, this is a prototype, so not everything is going to be quite as buttoned down and lined up as you're going to find in the actual production model. So you are going to see, some some irregular gaps when it comes to the fitment here. And then, it just generally, this is a less sharp, I guess you could say, iteration in comparison to what's going to actually be available. Now, this bezel has been a little bit tricky for me. It has a really nice action, but because this is a prototype, it actually has popped off a few times. So I'm going to try to be careful with it and not have it pop off on camera while I'm giving you guys an idea of what this 120 click bezel sounds like. Okay, so as you can see, not lining up perfectly in this case, because this is, again, is just a pre-production prototype. And as you guys know, this is, you know, a pretty early on prototype. So there are going to be changes. Things are going to be tightened up, buttoned down. But the general case shape and the aesthetic is definitely going to carry over into production. And I say that is what I'm most impressed by. Although this President bracelet is quite unique and quite comfortable, really for me the star of the show is this case, and this particular you know, setup. The gilt pops of gold are definitely very, very nice. Now, the movement inside, even though you can't see it, is the Miyota 9015, and then of course you do have that solid etched case back as seen here. As far as the dial goes, you do get that really nice textured dial there, as you can see. Some would call it a wave pattern of sorts. Some would say a scale pattern. I think it looks quite nice. I think some people even call it a cloudy pattern. Either way, it's a nice bit of texture there from something that's a little bit more out of the ordinary, which definitely helps, does add some visual interest. As you can see, the way the light plays off of that dial, it's really, really nice. You can see how some parts are just lighting up while other sections are staying dark, and it just makes it feel very three-dimensional, and it does add a ton of depth. Now, the loom is BGW9 Swiss Superluminova, water resistant to 30 atmospheres or 300 meters. It does have a 20 millimeter lug width, and then the bracelet itself is going to go from 20 millimeters down to 18, and then of course a 20 millimeter thick clasp, flip lock with multiple micro adjusts there. So really nice, I gotta say. And man, just look at the angles on this thing. Look at those beautiful lines. Look at that transition from the brushing in between the brush and the polish there. Really nice, helping just thin everything out. As you can see, it looks quite thin in the mid case, but a lot of that has to do with, I mean, also the fact that it's not a very thick watch, but because of that nice undercut here, and then you do have the over bezel on the shoulder, and then you have a rather thick actual bezel there, it really helps shrink this center case down, which is great as far as that kind of visual weight while it's on your wrist. Speaking of that, let's go ahead and get this thing mounted on the wrist. Okay, as you can see on my 7¼ inch wrist, even if I put a little bit more arm in there to give you an idea of scale, this thing wears really, really nice. Very compact, sits on the wrist really well, and of course, because it does have that Seiko inspired case shape, that definitely helps because Seikos tend to wear more ergonomic. Now, as you can see, it's a very soft curvature on the case there. It doesn't swoop down super low, but because of those chamfers and those cutouts, it's just super comfortable. And then you add to the fact that you do have this really nice president style bracelet there, the 3 links fully actuated and articulated, going down to a solid milled clasp. Even at this angle, you can see that it's not super thick. It's not something that's going to be, you know, wearing very tall. This is definitely going to be okay to find its way underneath a sleeve if it needs to. And then at this angle, you can really see how the play of light is really helping channel and just thin out that silhouette on the wrist. And then even up close, where watches tend to look huge just because of the kind of the distortion on the lens, because of that smaller dial, it keeps you know, your eyes from, I think, being tricked as much, and I think it actually is showing you just how much smaller it does appear and or tend to appear on wrist. So really nice. As you can see, great angle there. Loving the light play on here. Looking forward to getting this set up for some low light transition and some loom. All right, let's go ahead and hit the lights. As you can see, that BGW9 is just pumping away. Really, really nice. Great application on that quite thin bezel insert as well. So that's really impressive to see everything kind of coming together in the darkness there. One thing I do like to do while I am doing the loom shots, just get some light transition. One, so you guys can get a nice idea of what this watch will look like outside of optimal lighting conditions and direct sunlight, because you're not going to spend all of your time with the watch there. Also, it's going to give you a nice idea of the way the colors are going to render. Of course, this is a black dial, so it's not going to be quite as important. But what it also does is it exposes a little bit nicer idea of what that finishing quality is going to look like, because the brighter lights could definitely wash out a lot of the imperfections, versus here you're going to be able to see the way that the light moves over each link, you know, each brush, and you can see there the way that the light just plays with the watch and dances off of it. It gives you a great idea. Look at that brushed finish on that ceramic. Really clean and beautiful there. You can see that the gold accents are actually being picked up and drawn into the texturing there, which is really cool. It's a nice effect. Definitely adds a little bit of warmth to the dial as well. And you can see it kind of just catch just the right amount of light here at this very harsh angle. Almost looks a little star spangled there with some almost like space look. Little honeycomb lighting up there, as you can see. So really, really cool. Fun one under the low light for sure. Bracelet looks quite solid. Feels really good. Let's go ahead, get the lights back on, let that adjust, and then get into some closing thoughts. Now, on the wrist, of course, very, very classic proportions. It wears super well. It does have that contrasting outer ring, which does make the dial appear much smaller. So if you're worried about this watch being a bit large, fear not, because it's actually going to appear much smaller on the wrist. Now, as far as model variants go, definitely check for current availability. Like I said, last time I checked, there's actually quite a few variations that were already sold out. This might have even been one of them. As far as options go, you're going to have the choice between the different dial setups and whatnot, obviously color-wise, but also you're going to be able to choose between a date and no date. For the date models, their date is actually at the 6 o'clock, which many of you will definitely enjoy. This no date model, of course, is a little bit more symmetrical the way it's set up there with no date cut out, but I think either or are definitely great looking options. Now, as far as comparable models go, it's kind of tough, especially because this particular watch is taking more inspiration from Grand Seiko than it is from Seiko. But I gotta say, as far as kind of that value proposition and where it is, there's definitely tons of competition that's out there in that price range of, you know, under the $400 and whatnot. But this is actually quite a deal. I'm you know, this is something I could easily see them sell for $500, $600, $700. So it's really nice that they're actually selling these at under $400 at $390. So that's pretty outstanding. So for me, the bottom line is here, this is definitely another hip retro release from Borealis and their whole team over there. I think they have a great eye. And just the whole concept of this particular piece is definitely very cool, and they do have some very interesting color combinations and palettes that are optional that maybe you guys will check out and let me know how they look. So with all that said, if you liked the video, please do hit like, and if you haven't, please subscribe for more content just like this. Thanks, guys.